bells. Right. So a lot of incense, a lot of ringing of bells. And so like St. Margaret's Highgate, for example, there's some very Anglo-Catholic churches, but generally speaking, they're sort of like that. Less grand, of course, but very, very much like that.
Do you think
those were the propers that would be read? The propers are the lessons, the propers that would be read for funerals here. Also, you noted that there were no flowers in the church?
Yeah.
Yes, because we don't do that.
It's a very Jewish thing.
Well, we're very Jewish.
We don't do flowers.
We're sort of very Jewish Jesus stuff, Right.
That's very Jewish.
Yes.
The amount of text, a lot of text references.
Very Episcopal, very Anglican.
What I was happy to see was the amount of women that were involved. I thought that was very appropriate because it was a queen after all, but I thought it was nice that there were women clergy involved in it. And I'm sure that was a far cry from when her father was buried. I can't imagine that there were many women who even spoke.
But there were no Anglican clergy women who spoke. Right.
Are there?
Oh, yes. Oh, I take that back. The Bishop of London is a woman.
Oh, yeah. Malala. Oh.
I don't, Sarah somebody. I can't remember what her name is.
I noticed, yeah, she was a woman.
Right. And of course, the Prime Minister is a woman.
Liz Truss.
Right.
Liz Truss is indeed a woman. The third woman, I don't know why I said indeed, but because I'm talking about the English people, so I said indeed. She's now the third woman that they've had as a prime minister.
Right.
And we've had exactly 0 presidents that were women. So
that's right.
They have definitely. It's such a great seat. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you noticed this, but somebody dropped a card. One of the clergy dropped a card. And I was like, who could have picked that? And I never saw who picked it up.
Me either.
I'm like, oh, that would have been me. I would have dropped my card. I would go,
right.
I'm still wondering about the guy who
I understand that's gone viral.
before everyone else did.
what was that?
There was one outside when the gun carriage came up and everyone started taking off their hats to go in the church. There was one guy who took off his bearskin hat before everybody else did. And I'm still wondering about him. He's going to be, if that wasn't supposed to happen, he's going to be hat guy for the rest of his life.
That guy.
I mean, most of us, I think, were just amazed. Everyone was walking at the same,
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought,
for so long.
If the Chinese had done it, we would all be talking about militarism and regimentation, but the British did
Exactly.
it.
I've talked about that with friends since.
Choreography.
I mean, if we had a state funeral like that, and our state funerals tend to be at the National Cathedral, which is an Episcopal cathedral, but we don't have any military stuff. If we had military like that, people would be up in arms. I would
You
be.
said that on purpose.
I did say it on purpose. I would be very upset by that. But the English look so good in their uniforms, and they don't look menacing. Right.
She gets to wear a uniform now, her brother does.
Right.
Really upset.
How old is Princess Anne these days?
She's got to be 70.
I read something about that this morning, and he was told he could wear his uniform.
Oh,
And he offered to help. I looked it up this morning.
well, it was very noticeable.
Yeah, it was very noticeable. But he was, she's a working woman.
Who, Anne? Yeah.
No, I'm talking about hair.
No, about whether he could have worn it. We were talking about Andrew, the other the other redhead that was also not wearing.
Gave Harry permission. I think he gave him permission only for.
It was Saturday night, he wore it. He didn't wear it Saturday night.
Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't hear that.
So I will tell you that in my house, everybody said they wanted to watch it, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was the only person who got up. Everybody else said, go to, I don't care. My wife did wake up at about 5 and saw the end. I saw from about 2:30 until 4. I saw the Westminster. I couldn't. Wow. I know. So somehow I thought I had to watch it live. Anyways, I was the only one. Yeah.
Get up and do this. Did you watch it on BBC?
No, I watched it on NBC.
Yeah.
No, but I noticed that NBC, I watched it at NBC and they didn't talk the Westminster time. They didn't talk once. Did you notice that? They didn't, it was very respectful. They must have used the feed. They must have used the BBC feed. There must have been one feed.
There is one thing, that's what channels every now and then.
Yeah.
One thing.
Touched by the 2 minutes of silence in the church and
Outside. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that would never have happened here.
Yeah. 2 minutes of, yeah, Americans are not, yeah. Americans are not going to be silent for 2 minutes.
Oh, they're
I don't
going
know.
to.
The roses?
And use them, to, enrich the.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard Reverend Lynn, they said they're going to mulch those flowers. And I will tell you that my wife's family, I guess they're my family, they actually came down from Manchester to leave flowers. So I was kind of surprised because they're not like avid royals, but they were. My sister-in-law and my mother-in-law maybe is more captivated by that. You know, she reads those papers and stuff.
There's a history teacher, flew to England.
Oh my gosh.
Sit on the street.
Oh my goodness gracious. So yeah, that was our little taste of funerals. I think people were saying, you know, a lot of people were that was their most religious, maybe one of their most kind of like, I mean, maybe their greatest exposure to Anglican Episcopal ritual.
Church for about a month.
So that was the Reverend Canon who said she's out of church for a month on that. I think it was a really interesting chance to see what we revolted against in the first place. No, I said to myself, it is really amazing that this is in reality our common heritage. And you know, you think about probably how little has changed over the last 250 years. Probably, as I said, Victoria's service was probably much more like that. And the fact that somebody pointed out, she's been queen for 1/3 of American history, right? So she's about 210 years, 70 years of queen. I mean, no, not lived through it. She's been queen through a third. She's reigned through 1/3 of our history. So if you add her, I figured if you added her and Queen Victoria together, it's over half of our history. Because between those two, Mad King George. But I mean, that was actually like Victoria's great grandfather. I mean, great grandfather. So this isn't that long ago. So it's an amazing history. And I think Elise sent me a beautiful thing about, where's Elise? Is Elise?
Here I am. I am Gordon.
Some history, some Jewish connections to Elizabeth. What was your favorite one there about Elizabeth and her connections to the Jewish community, Elise?
They had a oil.
Yes,
yeah,
Marcia said that was in there. What was your
Right.
favorite one though, Elise?
I probably didn't have a favorite. I thought all four were very interesting.
Was what?
I did not have a favorite.
Oh, okay.
George and Charlie.
What was that?
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
yeah, yeah. They were very well behaved. They are the kids, the great grandkids, very well behaved.
The king and the king, future king and future king. As that kid has to understand, because look at his behavior at 9, he must get this.
Yeah, well, that kid who will be king one day, probably will be. Think about that. He'll be king probably 50, 60 years from now, right? And can you imagine the history that he's going to see? And I mean, we'll probably be on the moon. We'll probably be living on or being on another planet. It'll be people on another planet by the time that guy's king. And he's going to have those memories of being there.
I think the bottom line I walked away with yesterday was the whole country of England just observed it. There was no divide. Everything's fine. I mean, there might be people who didn't agree with it. We're certainly there are Republicans, but I mean, they weren't out sitting. Right. They put it on They did. They put-
Well, I will tell you, if I could have watched that with anybody, I would have preferred to watch it with the cast of Monty Python. Because I think they would have been that would have been the people I wanted to watch that with. Because they would have no, I know, but I'm talking about those guys. Those guys would have been amazing. They would have been very fun to watch with. And a couple of them are kind of Republican. So I know Helen Mirren is a big anti-monarchical person, a Republican. So there's a few British celebrities that are, but I will tell you, you are right, Marcia, because when I lived in England for that year, I was in university, and even back then was pretty liberal bastion, and everybody there was pretty liberal, just different shades of liberal. But that's typical, right? This was Oxford, the oldest university in the world, still very liberal. So I would get into debates with the British people. I said, but what about the royal family? And they would always start defending the royal family. I'm like, and they would all fly back and say, no, this helps our country have a sense of unity and purpose and all. I said, you pay for this. So this is the ultimate nepotism. And that was their excuse. They would say, yeah, but look at all you dumb Americans. You come here and you come and spend money every time, I said, listen, I'm American. I'll go to Versailles, right? I don't need to have a living royal to be in that building. And they would say stuff like, yeah, but you come over for the coronations and for the weddings and for the funerals. And I said, you know what? A royal execution would get a lot of people out there. I'd fly out there for that. So that was that. So I said, look, I'll pay for that. I said, I don't think one less person will go to Buckingham Palace if there isn't a monarch living there. I'd love to see, actually take me through the quarter. I'd like to see the whole back. You can only go in the back. You can only go in the back if they're not living there. You don't get to see anything. Yeah.
One, the bear heads.
Yeah.
Did they pass them on or did they kill more bears?
Hey, Rosemary. By the way, Rosemary, you'll know that. Rosemary, bear hats, are they still killing bears for those, or?
As far as I know, yes.
Uh-oh.
I don't know.
Rosemary says, Rosemary will know. I trust her that she'll know.
I shall look it up.
The bear hats? Oh, yeah.
I assume they get recycled.
They what?
I said I would assume they get recycled. I don't think they have to kill a fresh bear
I don't
every
know,
time somebody joins up.
Some,
Another really important
yeah.
question is, how do all those people marching pee?
How do they pee?
Along the way.
Says here, yes, they are made of bear skin.
Wait, what was that?
Hours.
What?
9,
Somebody offered a solution. What was that?
I said.
Yeah, diapers. That's what I would say. Catheters, diapers.
100 skins.
What?
Hundreds of bears are killed annually in Canada, and 100 skins go to the British Army.
Uh-oh, there you go. See, Rosemary knew. Rosemary knew.
She looked it up. And you know what?
Oh, I think she knew it.
You think they do it?
I think Rosemary knew that. What?
They don't, but they really.
Those are Canadian bears. It's part of their game.
Trying to march with them.
I did too.
Amazing, Mark. And when we said the same thing, there was no way they had enough time to rehearse that. They're just good at it.
Oh, no, they've been rehearsing for years.
Yeah.
Was the caisson pulled by the young naval. people.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was wild. That was one of the most amazing when they were pulling
Oh.
the coffin on the. No, they said they didn't do it because of Queen Victoria. The horses ran off and they said they never want to have that in.
And the horses reared and threatened to overturn the carriage, so they
Yeah.
switched.
Which is to me, it's a great solution, but I was wondering how heavy it really is. I want to ask one of those people.
Well, they have
Was
a lot
it-
of people.
I know it was a lot of people. It was weird, but I thought it was kind of cool. I mean, it was like a good solution for, yeah.
It's like they were pulling rocks to the.
It was a little bit like, yeah, it was a little slavey, a little slavey, as we call it.
But that's the subject that came up about the whole royals. is how did the Royals become so famous and so royal? Because they, and I don't know the true name. Yeah,
Well-
it's the same story, like.
Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look, Rosemary, because actually I do have to run off early. As you can see, I'm wearing my funeral garb today. This is as regimental at 10:30. This is as regimental as I get. So I do, no, I have my tie and my jacket in the car. Believe me, I'm not wearing a jacket. I don't have a clip-on tie. No, I have to go to Eden. What? That's right. It says Rabbi. I don't have any titles. Somebody once called me the chief rabbi of Santa Clarita, but I don't know. I don't even know if I can call myself that. They do have a chief rabbi in England, by the way. You know that, right? El Jefe. Yeah, that's my title, but that only Judith calls me that. Yeah, oh yeah. There's a Rabbi Mervis is his name, Ephraim Mervis, and he is as well known as Sachs. That's why I looked for him. He was not there. I didn't see him. I don't know that he wasn't there, but he wasn't seated up with the mucky mucks.
There was a cowboy there from Albany who helped with the Queen's horses
Oh.
and they became friends.
That's nice.
Oh, yeah.
That's a cool. Anyways, it was a
Fairly personable.
Yes.
Yeah.
They interviewed the bagpiper.
yeah.
Every morning they would bagpipe.
Oh, by the way, on a happier note, yeah, the bagpipe. I'm a sucker for bagpipes. You know that. Actually, my wife knows. I actually have. I've asked. And Rosemary, yes, I've asked because of Granada. It's Mike knew. It's because of Granada High. I need bagpipers. I need pipers, and it is. They know. My whole family knows. They know. I want Amazing Grace, and Mike knows. It's because of Granada. My high school. I actually grew up next to one of the pipers when I was a little kid. He was a few years older than me, and he lived next door. And I would listen to Paul. He would play the bagpipes, and I just became like, I don't even know if I just loved it. And so, oh yeah, back in the day.
And they were the best band.
Yeah, we had this crazy Scottish thing going at at Granada Hills. It was the Highlanders. We had Highland dancers. It was like totally a thing that was their what? There was no cable. There was a great like pageantry to it, and it was great too because by the time I was there, we had a fairly diverse crew there, and so there was African American students, Hispanic students, Armenian students. Everybody was wearing their kilts if they were in the marching band, and you'd be like, "Holy moly, that doesn't look like Scotland." There was not one redhead or pale person amongst them. They were all, it was a very diverse California crowd. Jewish kids, what?
They won
Yeah.
awards.
Yeah, we would win a lot of awards because we had that shtick going. I mean, it was a great little thing. But they couldn't, the problem was they ran out of they didn't train new bagpipers. So we it's a very hard instrument. So somebody showed, somebody tried to take me through. I'm like, this is something I can never do. You do? Was he good though?
Oh, it was very good.
Yeah, you have to say that. Yeah,
It was like the Pied Piper.
it was great though. Oh. I mean, the problem is if you don't sound good with it, it's not a pleasant thing to hear. It's like, they say like skinning cats, but there was a wonderful bagpiper at David Watson's funeral, right, Rosemary?
Yes.
He was a great piper, and I talked to him a little bit, and it turns out I got his business card, gave it to my wife. I said, here's our piper if we need to find something. But that's not easy. It's not easy to find piper.
Part of the funeral, I was over the last 25 minutes at Windsor Castle. They have to lower the casket. It is extreme.
Mike Schwartz has said he wants to hear Cole Nidre on the bagpipes. That will be, I don't think it's going to sound good, but I'd love to see it. Anyways, go. No, I'd like to try different instruments, but the whole concept of that was to do a tribute to Woodstock on was Jimi Hendrix. No, we tried. You didn't know. Hey, one thing though, if you ever have a chance and you go on, it's on Spotify. And if you like bagpipes at all, there was a jazz musician back in the 60s named Rufus Harley. And he did he was a really, really accomplished jazz musician. And he did a bagpipe blues. And he played bagpipes. Oh, it was so good. Bagpipe. He did. He taught himself the bagpipes, and he did this thing called the Bagpipe Blues, and it's on Spotify. And if you like bagpipes at all, listen to Rufus Harley. And I'll never forget, 'cause my dad loved jazz, and he had a huge jazz library. And I'll never forget, this album. And I used to live. No, he wasn't. He was an African-American dude. And I just remember this African-American dude in a kilt playing the bagpipes on the cover of the album. And I was like, that is my favorite. And it turned out, like, I started listening, and I was like, I can't stop listening. Kilts
Yeah.
for holidays.
Little tartan, and it's very unattractive.
It is. It's not a good tartan.
No, not.
Bagpipe. It's called bagpipe blues. Rufus Harley. Bagpipe.
Did you?
Oh, hold it a second. Bagpipe.
And the Sparkborough vote is live this year.
Yeah, right there.
It's called Bagpipe Blues.
Yes.
I did ask the question.
Yeah.
Is live this year at 80.
I know. I'm going to be there. Oh, so there you go. So Kever Avot, that's a Jewish thing. Kever Avot, the Jewish pageantry. Yeah, I'll be doing a part of that service. So it's at October the 2nd, 3rd, something like that at Eden.
Don't know.
Kever Avot. Yeah, no, it's
the
it's
best holiday
not the best. Stop it.
It is.
Okay, it's a communal burial thing where,
They just have a rabbi walk.
yeah, so we basically say prayers for the people who have passed, and it gives us like a communal service for people. And there won't be 1,000 people this year. I promise you that, Marcia. But yes, we are doing Kever Avot. It's 10 o'clock.
Isn't it like
I don't
this?
even think they're doing it this year. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's just good, but
It's Yisker for the people. Yes, and it is traditional to visit, as Judith's saying, it's traditional, but you didn't have parents that had passed.
no, but
Now you do.
parents have parents.
I understand, but
No,
it's October 2nd at 10 a.m. at Eden. There are other ones going on. The one at Eden is, I don't know if it's everywhere.
Well, this is the first year.
It's
Ethan
back.
did it.
Yes, we did a televised one. So anyways, yeah, I'll be there at 10 o'clock on the, too many people. All right, folks. Eden, at,
You
at,
could certainly stand to the perimeter to the
Oh, I
side.
don't go to eat. All my family's up in Sherman.
up in the, you know where that is, up in Cagle Canyon. That's way up there in Sun Valley.
Oh, that's the Mount Sinai?
No,
No, Mount Sinai's
No.
off of the one-
Cagle Canyon is where you feel like you're in another state.
Oh, yes.
There's a
You're
cemetery.
in another
Another country. Yes, thank you. It's called Shalom. It's by Glenhaven Cemetery. Reverend Lynn's been up there.
Lopez Canyon.
Lopez Canyon. Yeah, you got to go up Lakeview Terrace. I have family there too.
You do sit, yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, not well maintained,
Oh, it's better than it has been, but.
I guess. Unfortunately, we have some families there, including Gail. Joe Renson is buried at that cemetery. Right, Gail? Yes, she knows. So,
Beautiful spot.
yeah, it's just not well maintained, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah, I have great grandparents that are buried there. I have, yeah, it's an older cemetery.
For big Israel cemeteries, over my summer holidays.
There you go.
For my synagogue, which was a Revolutionary War synagogue.
So I don't know your area real well. Is Eden the oldest Jewish cemetery?
Well, sorry.
Is Eden, I don't know your area. Is Eden the oldest cemetery?
No, Eden is not. The oldest cemetery is at Dodger Stadium, and then they unearthed all the bodies. No, seriously, the oldest Jewish cemetery in LA was B'nai B'rith Synagogue in LA, had a cemetery in Chavez Ravine. There's a little plaque in front of the fire academy where it was. They moved it. And then they moved it down to the area of East LA, which is where the oldest Jewish, that's where my father's buried, yeah. It's Home of Peace. And then there's another cemetery next door to that called something else, but it's also very old and is also, like, they don't even bury it there anymore.
We were, where Mary's grandparents are.
Yeah.
I saw graves back in the early 1800s.
Where?
In Southern Illinois.
In Southern Illinois, yeah. Yeah.
Middle of the corner.
Yeah. No, we don't have those in LA. Our oldest cemeteries are Native Americans who's, we don't even know where they are until we find them by accident. What? Yeah, we have old Jewish cemeteries in New York. Yeah, we do. But they're still not that old. We were talking about the late 1700s. Because up until that, you have a few families and they used to bury in their backyard. Seriously. Oh, yeah. Anyways, well, we were talking about the royalty and I was going to use that as a segue into what Rosemary was going to say. So let's go back to not a good queen, Queen Jezebel. And we are going to read here today for a part of the story of Elijah the prophet versus, really, as we see, not so much against Ahab, but against his wife, Jezebel. And of course, Jezebel had already gone on a killing rampage and killed all the prophets of God, and she had installed her own prophets of Baal. And then Ahab has his duel we read last week against the prophets of Baal, and the people go and kill them. And Ahab doesn't do anything about it. He comes home and tells his wife what had happened. And as it says, all that Elijah had done and how he had put all the prophets to the sword. Now, Elijah did advocate for this purge of the Baal worship, but it was the people who did it. I mean, he didn't kill 400 priests. They did. I mean, he told them to, and I mean, I guess you could say he's responsible for it. But if you notice, Elijah doesn't say that. He puts it all on, Ahab puts it all on Elijah. He says it's Elijah had done it, not they had done it, not the people of Israel had done it. And notice too, he takes no responsibility for it himself. He was there. He comes back and tells her what's out. He didn't protect her prophets. So my guess is that, assuming again, taking yourselves into this bedroom chamber or wherever the king and queen of the northern kingdom of Israel, as they called it, they didn't call it the northern kingdom. We call it that. They called it the kingdom of Israel. And as the husband and wife are talking there that night, when Ahab comes home and tells his wife that all her prophets have been murdered, she might ask him, well, what did you do about it, husband? And he did nothing. And it seems as that, at least for a moment, that Ahab has got a new recruit in Elijah, that Elijah seems to at least get it for the moment, because he runs back in front of, as we read, he ran back to the kingdom from Mount Carmel, which is modern day Haifa. They run through the Jezreel Valley. They go from west to east. And Ahab is in his chariot and Elijah's running in front of him. And it doesn't seem like this is a problem. It seems like, again, he's almost like they're working together at this point. But once Ahab gets home, it doesn't seem like that is what's happening. And we're going to see again now what happens. So Jezebel sends a message. This is what we finished. Sent a message to Elijah and say, thus and more may the gods do. By this time tomorrow, I have not made you like one of them. So she pretty much just threatened his life. I mean, it's pretty obvious. That's pretty much a threat from the queen, which is not a good situation when the head of the country says that they're going to kill you. So here's what Elijah does. So Rosemary, take it away.
Can you hear me all right? I'm on my iPad today.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay. Frightened, he fled at once for his life. He came to Beersheba, which is in Judah, and left his servant there. He himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush and sat down under it and prayed that he might die. Enough, he cried. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers.
Now, so he's on the run. He goes out to the desert. He sits underneath a broom brush, which is, like a big, if you want to think about it, like a big tumbleweed. Before it's become a tumbleweed, it's still attached, but not exactly a tree. Yeah. It's not a nice, it's not a beautiful tree. And he says, I want to die. Who does he sound like, my friends? Those of us who study this every year. Who does he sound like?
Jonah.
Like Jonah, exactly. Thank you. But we're going to read at Yom Kippur. We read this very short story of Jonah, right? At Yom Kippur, at the end of Yom Kippur. And we always read this story about how Jonah keeps telling God, I want to die. Well, sits underneath the same kind of thing, right? A gourd tree, which is one of the traditions of maybe why we use gourds at Sukkot. It actually says he sat under a sukkah. He built himself a sukkah. Right. So it's a similar kind of situation that he sits underneath some kind of tree and says, I want to die. And so that's one of the reasons why we say that maybe the kid that he resurrected was Jonah, that maybe he's got a little bit of Elijah in him, which is maybe a little bit of a kind of, if not a manic depressive type of person, somebody who can really hit. I really, and that's why I said kind of like, because I don't like to say that, especially now. I've become more sensitive to saying manic depressive because that's actually a clinical term and it's not, it's a serious issue and we throw that term around a lot and we joke about it and it's not. He seems very sad and he seems somewhat, and he may not be manic, he might just be depressed. He might be a depressive person. And maybe he doesn't have highs. We don't ever hear Elijah going, hey, I'm having a wonderful day today. So we don't, he's doesn't necessarily, could have just been a person with depression. Most of the people in the Torah true. So good stories. Listen, we see, I will tell you, we saw it a couple of months ago. We saw King David has some really good days. King David dances around. He's happy. He's got some good days. King David, by the way, I think doesn't even let bad days get him down. Like he's crying. He's very sad when his son's dying. And then he gets stressed and he says, it's over. Like he really is he's that kind of guy who has the ability to compartmentalize and say, hey, you know what? It's a new day. I'm not going to carry that with me. This is not Jonah. This is not Elijah. Doesn't seem like a lot of the prophets are happy-go-lucky people. It's true because they're probably getting bombarded with negativity, right? They're hearing all the bad things that are going to happen that God tells them. And so maybe that's the kind of personality these people had. Moses is definitely doesn't seem to have a lot of happy days. A lot of work. And so Elijah's despondent and he basically says, enough. That's the word he uses, enough. And of course, it's interesting because he's not even close to being done yet. Well, he's got some big stuff still happening. So, and notice, by the way, he says, I'm no better than my fathers, which is an interesting phrase too, because he's also somewhat saying here, I'm not doing any better than the people who came before me. And maybe even people like Moses. Maybe he's saying again, none of the prophets seem to have been able to get through to these people. And of course, they won't. The prophets that are going to come after him, and there's a whole bunch of prophets that come after him. Elijah is one of the oldest prophets that we actually have a name for, right? The other prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, those are guys that are all still coming along. So he's actually Jonah, as we said, he's older than Jonah. So he's 150, 200 years, even 300 years before some of the prophets. There's other prophets coming along and maybe they all felt this at a point, which is, I can't get through to them. The previous prophets didn't get through to them either, which I guess maybe is, kind of what we say when we go, I'm not doing my job. And guess what? The people before me, they didn't do their job either, which I guess is kind of a fallback position of kind of, I don't know if acceptance is the right word, but kind of recognition that we're not getting the job done. But it's a very depressing. Like at every level, this is not great, including obviously his, in the fancy terms, the suicidal ideation that he seems to be demonstrating here, where he says, I'd rather be dead. I'd rather die. So here's what happens.
He lay down and fell asleep under a broom bush. Suddenly, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. He looked about, and there beside his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, or the journey will be too much for you.
So he gets visited by an angel. That's pretty cool.
Do we know what angel or what?
We don't, yeah, we don't see the name of the angel. It says a Malach Adonai. It says an angel of the Lord, which is why it translates it as angel of the Lord. Is it an angel Michael? I don't know. Or is it the angel Raphael, the angel that heals people? Oh, no, this isn't a hallucination. Marcia, this is an hallucination. Why? Because there's food. The angel actually gave him a cake, a birthday cake. No, it says he gave him a cake. A cake was there and a jar of water. And
Twice.
yeah. And so most of us, when we are having a bad day, angel food cake. So angel food. But,
Better than a devil's food cake, I
yeah,
guess.
devil's was it? Well, which came first, right? The angel food cake or the devil's food cake come first? I don't know. Devil's food. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which came first. So, and why is that a white and black thing, by the way? I don't know. So, anyways, I don't want to think about the politics of that cake. But anyways, most of us don't get an angel to bring us food, but it's interesting, by the way. But Marcia just pointed to her husband, but most of us, and by the way, an angel of the Lord.
Watching online.
That's right. Sorry. So for those who are online, but I will tell you that the angel of the Lord, we understand usually obviously has magical, supernatural capabilities. But the interesting thing is the word for angel is actually messenger, right? So the reality is that a malach, we're not always sure, unless it says, in this case, it says malach Adonai, an angel of the Lord. But oftentimes a malach is also the same word. It is exactly the same word as a messenger, as a human messenger. So it's an interesting issue that, people can be angels for us. So, whether we get an angel who actually comes and brings us food or, gives us the support we need at a time that we need to be told, to get up and eat. Get up and eat. Yep. And what happens, by the way, let's look at this. Happens 2 times. The angel says, arise and eat, or the journey will be too much for you. And so what the angels, like your mom, that's right, like a Jewish mother. It's a Jewish mother angel. If you Essen, as they say, Essen. So if you look at this, the angel's also telling him, you got more work to do. You've got a journey in front of you, right? And so the angel is also telling him, it's not just a matter of eating. You've got work to do. You've got a journey in front of you. By the way, we don't know, and I brought this up last time, we don't know that Elijah was actually told exactly to deprive the people of water for 3 years. It doesn't, we're sometimes maybe kind of like led to believe that Elijah is simply telling everybody exactly what God is saying. We don't know that I will say that, let me put it in a different way. There is even a rabbinic tradition that Elijah takes everything a step too far, that he is zealous for the Lord, as we see, and that's what he actually says. I'm zealous for the Lord, but sometimes his zeal might go a little too far. And so interestingly, God seems to go along with it, but there also seems to be an idea, maybe even by the rabbis, that did he really have permission to be this strict with the people? Did it really have to be 3 years? Couldn't he have got his point across? And if God's going to enforce what Elijah says, to some extent, God actually has to, right? Because if Elijah says it and he's a prophet of God, if he says something and it doesn't happen, then people are going to go, well, Elijah's lying. Elijah's not a real prophet. So to some extent, he's forcing God's hand. He literally says, well, I've got God's given me power, write the check on this.
That some rabbis feel
Yeah, and there's this idea that he is an angel, right? So when you read this, it doesn't seem like he gets it. Now, look, what is the answer? People would say, well, he's living as a human being. And so he has to be reminded he's got to do his stuff, right? He's got to be a human being while he's in the human body. When he goes back up out of the world, then he becomes an angel again. But while he's on the earth, he's living like a person. Look, I'm only going to tell you, where did the rabbis get this stuff? I must say stuff. Where did they come up with this from? Where did this go? Well, folks, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because as we heard yesterday, that's a very important feature to Christianity, which is that the idea of what Jesus actually is, which is, to some extent, if Jesus existed before as the Son and then manifests in this world and then leaves this world, this is where it comes from. The same type of, this transmigration, this is where it comes from. And so for the rabbis to say Elijah did this kind of stuff and manifested himself in the world as an angel who became a human being and then went back to being an angel again, not really much different. And again, I didn't say that's all forms of Christianity. I want to be very clear. It's not exactly what every form of Christianity, but there were some, and you see it. We saw it in the pseudepigrapha. We saw it in the writings of Jews from this time, that they were very comfortable with it. So a lot of the writings about Elijah and Enoch, and some people say Elijah and Enoch are the exactly same entity, but that an entity can come into this world, manifest itself, and then kind of leave this world and go back up to heaven is not very much different than at least the way some of the teachings about Jesus were in this world. So this was something that we don't talk about it. It's not a prominent feature, let's say, in the Midrash, but it is there. There are allusions to it in some of the Midrash about Elijah then becoming essentially, whether or not he existed before he was in the flesh, or whether because he doesn't really die, he becomes a kind of a resurrected being. That is very much part of the Elijah myth. Because if Elijah can still be seen in our world as the wandering Jew, by the way, it's the origin of the origin of that myth of a wandering Jew. If Elijah is still here, can go back and forth between heaven, then whether or not to some extent he existed before he was a human, or he became a human who was a human who became an angel, I don't know that there's a huge difference to that. And by the way, this is kind of a feature of also Eastern faiths where people believe in incarnations of Krishna, where again, there's a deity that comes into the world and then takes on human form and then is resurrected, comes back in another form. And so this idea is not really uncommon. There's actually millions of people who believe this. Well, Elijah does come first, right? So Elijah, these teachings come first, and we'll actually see that. We'll actually look next week, or not next week. Next week is, we don't have class next week. We have Rosh Hashanah next week. But we will come back for this in 2 weeks. This idea of Elijah, what happens to Elijah is very important. But we're not there yet. He's still in our world right now. And what he's been told by the angel, and again, Mike's point is, if this is an angel already, he's either forgotten, or he's really as a human being. Human, yeah. Yeah, well, I would say that was more mainstream. That was more of the mainstream idea of who Elijah was. But this idea that he is still developing, and by the way, just keep in mind, is his role that he plays, because he's obviously very special. He's very passionate about God. He's a prophet. He does the job. But does Elijah actually, is his immortality a blessing or is it a curse? So we normally think it's a blessing.
Think about all that food and drink.
Think about a lesson, but he can never die.
There are others that don't actually die.
Well, he's the only one that we read about. Enoch is the first, right? But we're not clear that Enoch didn't die. The rabbis and the midrash and the pseudepigrapha takes on a whole nother, possibility with Enoch, that he either becomes an angel, he becomes the angel, Metatron. There are a lot of possibilities of what happens to Enoch, but it is also possible that Enoch did in fact die. It says he walked with God and he was no longer. That's what the Bible said. So it is possible that he died. Elijah gets carried up into chariot of heaven. Did he die and get carried up into chariot of heaven? We don't see his body. We don't really know. And so his is a little bit more problematic because we actually never hear the words he died, which is why there's even more myth about him. Enoch's seems to be that he died and got taken up. I don't know. I mean, it's very mystery. No, it's very, very mysterious. But I will tell you, there was a time when Enoch literature was very, very important and very important for Jews. And all of that Enoch and Elijah literature, to some extent, affected the Jesus literature, which is why we said that moment of the transfiguration of Jesus seeing, and the disciples seeing Moses and Elijah is a complete affirmation of the prominence that Elijah had during Jesus's time.
Here's something, maybe Enoch and Jesus, same person.
There were people who said that. There were a lot of people who said that Enoch and Jesus were the same people. And if they did, then again, that's within the realm of Judaism to some extent. And maybe there were early Christian Jews who believed that.
This and Jesus,
What do you mean? Between Elijah and Jesus?
Yeah.
700 years.
700 years later.
So, but we don't have that. We will, I'm jumping the gun. We will talk about the first reference we have to Elijah being
Or Enoch, is it the same time period?
Enoch. Yeah, no. Enoch lived before Abraham, but we don't know anything else about him. Elijah, though, is actually referred to in the Bible itself. And that's the interesting thing. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. Elijah's reference is actually in the Bible. It's in the prophet Malachi. He actually references Elijah in the Bible. So the idea of Elijah having a prominent role to play, and not just a prominent role, but a prominent role at the end of days, which is what Malachi says, is really, really substantial because it shows that at least 200 or 300 years before Jesus, the legends of Elijah had already taken root. And that's before the pseudepigrapha. It's before any of these other texts existed. It's before the Midrash existed. So Elijah literature is very old. All right. So, and again, it exists in the Bible itself. All right. Let's continue with his journey.
He arose and ate and drank, and with the strength from that meal, he walked 40 days and 40 nights as far as the mountain of God at Horeb.
By the way, 40 days and 40 nights. Hello. He goes to
Yes.
Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, Mount Sinai, the other name for Mount Sinai, or at least according to some authors, it is the mountain of God where we got the 10 Commandments, where Moses first saw the burning bush. Because remember, in the Bible, and we're reading this on our Wednesday night class, the Exodus class, we know that Moses comes back with the people to the mountain where he saw God at the burning bush. It was the same mountain. And so he sees God first at that mountain. He encounters God first at that mountain. And then everybody encounters God at that mountain. So this mountain was special to him, special to him. Now it's special to Elijah. So the connections between Elijah and Moses, I mean, listen, it's very pronounced. Now, of course, 40 days, 40 nights, Mount Horeb, all of this stuff is very reminiscent. But what, of course, is so sad is that Elijah is on the run from his own people, from God's own people. He's not running away from Pharaoh. He's not running away from, slavery. He's running away from a Jewish king, Ahab, whose wife has said, I'm going to kill you. He has no home. Now, what's weird is that after he destroys the prophets of Baal, and he seems as though maybe King Ahab gets what he's doing, reinstalling, belief in God. Maybe for a moment, he thought he had gotten through. And so I like to point out that, like, this is a man who maybe thought he had accomplished his job, and now he's running for his life. And I mean, you go from one extreme to the other, even if you don't have a chemical imbalance, even if you're not, even if you're not dealing with a depression, that experience could drive you to some pretty dark depths, because you go from this tremendous high to this feeling of now there's only you. These people who are at the Mount Sinai 300 years earlier, 350 years earlier, they're gone now. It's just him. And as far as he's concerned, he's it. So here's what happens to him on the mountain of God.
There he went into a cave, and there he spent the night. Then the word of the Lord came to him. He said to him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He replied, "I am moved by zeal for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life."
So he says it flat out. What's bothering him, right? People have left the tradition. They've left you, God. They've put your prophets to the sword. So I'm like the only one, right? I'm alone left. And now they're trying to kill me. So, God, do you need any more reasons why I feel terrible right now? Now, he says, I'm moved by zeal, by kana is the word, right? Kana kineti. I am very zealous. I am moved by zeal is the translation. What is it in Marion, the King James? How does King James say it? Yeah, been very jealous. So again, the word jealous and zealous are actually connected. They are the same root. However, in English, we don't really talk about those two. So he is very jealous for God. And the word is actually, again, it's the emphatic. It's the two versions, which is why it was translated as very jealous, which is, I think, a better translation than I'm moved by zeal. No, he's passionate. All these words could be used. I am incensed, enraged, engulfed by emotion for you, God, which also could explain why he does things like tell people God's not going to bring you water for the next 3 years, because he is very, very passionate, maybe too passionate.
So I'm struggling with the zeal
Yeah.
and the jealous.
Yeah.
So, because the zeal I see is moving and doing and wanting, but jealous, I mean, he's jealous of the
Just
Lord.
use it so differently.
Yeah.
Is jealous
That's
what?
Was, it's just what was. Okay,
What?
it's just what was.
Yeah,
then.
except
Jealous.
Except,
Why would you be jealous for the Lord? You're there asking for guidance.
it's a fair question, right? Fair question, right? Marcia wants to know what do you have to be jealous for, right? Why is somebody knows what I'm about to?
Maybe because
somebody-
the Lord has all the power.
Well, God has power. That's absolutely. Does anybody know what else? What I'm going to throw down right now for everybody to see? Somebody tell me. Somebody jump on what I'm going to show right now. It's a two-way street, folks, right?
That's a jealous God.
Whoa, Rosemary just said it.
Jealous.
Why do we know that?
Because it's in the
of
10 Commandments, isn't it?
100%, Rosemary.
Gosh, I just missed so many little trinkets.
Rosemary is here to tell you,
Thank you, Rose.
you shall not bow down to God, for I, your God, Adonai, and am impassioned God, which is a nice way of saying what the King James probably says, Mary, what does it say in 25? A jealous God. A jealous God. Why? Because it's the same word, El-Kana. I'm El-Kana. And this is not the only time that it's used, right? Jealous God is the King James.
Versus-
Yeah, but you almost have to use the same word because it is reciprocal. The arrangement goes both ways. God is jealous for us, of us, and we're jealous, or at least some of these people are jealous. The other person that we know is jealous is the priest Phineas, who is Aaron's grandson. And it says that he is jealous for God. And what does he do? Or zealous for God? He goes and spears two people that are worshiping Baal, right? They're worshiping in the desert. He spears them as they are, what's that? Flagrant, what's the?
Heard an interesting name for God.
In flagrante, yeah. Wounded lover for God. God is a wounded lover. There's definitely a feeling that the word kana is the kinds of words that we'd use for jealous, for a relationship, it's not just as the word has, I am moved by zeal for you, which doesn't seem to be, it seems to be nice, but it doesn't seem to be passionate. It doesn't seem to be as aggressive sometimes as well, because when we use the word jealousy almost all the time, it doesn't lead to something good. I'm just saying, normally saying, oh, my boyfriend is jealous, and then he beats up everybody who talks to me, right? Or looks at me.
Mhm.
So that's usually the next part of that, is that it didn't lead to good behavior. And there is a similar idea in Judaism to some extent, that there's going to be a consequence for getting in the way of someone's kana. Now, we saw what happened to the priests of Baal. They weren't given a chance to say, hey, I don't like Baal anymore. They were killed that day. They were massacred that day by a guy who was very jealous for God. You want my proof? Now, God knows everything. God says to him, why are you here, Elijah? Now, this is, of course, is a very powerful phrase, because God, knowing everything, still has to ask Elijah, why are you here? Malacha po, Eliyahu. What does the King James say? It's probably pretty close to that. What doest thou here? Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. It's a very powerful phrase, because essentially it is the phrase that God asks every one of us when we're really talking to God. And if God ever answered our prayers of at least opening the line of communication, I wonder whether the first thing that God would say is, what are you doing here? What do you want? What do you want? Ma lecha po. Why are you here? What's up? And, his answer is, hey, God, I'm jealous for you. I do the right stuff. I'm very passionate, and I'm here and I'm by myself. And that's what his answer is. This is one of the most powerful dialogues in the Bible between a human being and God. So if you think that that's all we're going to do today, just understand that the timing of this is very profound, because right before the high holidays every year, we ought to read this. Actually, this could be the reading, and people have argued that this should be the reading for the high holidays, because this confrontation that we have with God, that Elijah has with God, that this human being has with God, is very reminiscent of the other one, which was Moses at this same place in Exodus chapter 34, where he says to God, I want to see your face. I want to know you as much as a person can know you. And God says, you can't, but I'll show you my back. Now here, Elijah is confronted to some extent with a bigger issue, which is Moses was told to go to Mount Sinai. He wasn't. We don't know that Elijah was ever told to go here. I mean, he goes here because the angel tells him to go on his journey, to continue on a journey. But was Elijah ever supposed to run away? Was Elijah ever supposed to run away? Was Elijah ever supposed to turn
Should have faced his death.
into himself and say, I want to die?
Actually, should have faced his death.
Who knows? But we're not 100, most people read this and go, oh, Elijah's very lucky he gets to see God. Let's see.
Is he considered a coward for running?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a possibility, right? But let's answer that question because we are going to finish with this story today. Yeah.
Would you like me to go unlock the door and I'll lock it later? If you're gonna run out of here.
Sure,
I
sure.
wanna give you the candle. So unlock the
Sure.
door.
Thanks.
You can run out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks.
But they did bring the chairs.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Or you can just put them in there. You don't need the key. You can
Oh, do you want them here or you want them on
no,
that
put them
thing?
up there. Put them in. You can put them through that door. Don't worry about it. All right. So here's the scene, folks. And this is the scene. One of the most powerful scenes of confronting God, right? He says, I alone am left and they are out to take my life. That is what Elijah says. So now it's God's response.
Come out, he called, and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And lo, the Lord passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by the power of the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft murmuring sound.
Which if you look at it, it says a still small voice. What does the King James say?
Still small voice, I'm
Still
sure.
small voice is much better than a soft murmuring sound. Now they knew what they were doing when they said a soft murmuring sound. They went with the word, the Hebrew is kol demama daka, which is they translated as kol, voice, as a sound, and they translated the word demama daka, which is a soft sound or soft murmur. Demama is like the word murmur. It's an onomatopoeia. Yeah, it's onomatopoeia, right? So what did the sound of God sound like? Well, the Bible just described it as a still small voice, which is obviously however you understand that. I mean, it's really important to kind of imagine that, but obviously the point of this is that it's not where you thought it would be. Well, what's weird, it's kind of ironic, actually. It really is ironic. This is true. God was actually in every one of those other things too, right? God made all those things happen. So does God made them happen. But God wasn't there. God didn't, whatever God wanted to get through to Elijah, whatever Elijah heard was not in those. So he saw those things, he heard them, he saw the rocks explode, he saw, these miracles in front of him that were clearly only done by God, like a burning bush experience. To some extent, it's even more impressive because it's not one thing. It's all these things. It's an earthquake, it's wind, it's earthquake, it's fire.
Just another day in California.
What? It's just another day. I was in my backyard and I saw this.
Such things are very masculine.
All those things, yeah.
But a still small voice or a soft murmuring sound is not.
It's interesting that Reverend Lynn said that because I have to actually, it's a beautiful midrash, beautiful explanation, because the words kol demama daka actually are feminine forms. So I will say the word aish and the word ra'ash, which by the way, it's interesting that Reverend Lynn caught that because the word in Hebrew for the things that we heard are ruach, which is wind, ra'ash, which is the sound of the ra'ash is noise. But here it's translated as, is it translated as earthquake, ra'ash? Earthquake, yeah. So ra'ash is another onomatopoeia. Rosh is noise. Rosh, 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 right? We say Havanarisha, right? At Purim, the sound of the grogger makes a rosh sound. So rosh is a noise, but here it's understood to be the sound of rumbling, the sound of an earthquake. So it's a ruach, it's a rosh, and it's aish. And all of those words are masculine, and they actually sound even in Hebrew very forceful, right? Ruach, Ra'ash, Aish. And then kol demama daka, the at the end shows you it's a feminine form. That those words are definitely much more passive, less aggressive, less in your face, less noisy, if you want to say less masculine to some extent. But I like that, because there is something to this, which is he doesn't hear it, or he doesn't expect it, I should say. He doesn't expect, we wouldn't expect it, but he actually hears God in the soft murmuring sound, which is I have to look to see if anyone's ever, the only people who would ever have said this, Reverend Lynn, are most likely, somebody who kind of created a feminist midrash on it. But I definitely I would like to see if they did it. Yeah.
I'll check.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see if somebody ever has commented on it, because it definitely would be a more modern interpretation, but it's a very consistent interpretation, I think, with the language, because, some people have tried to translate or try to look at what those words, kol demama daka, would be, is that it's almost like the word daka is like wafer thin. So I've seen a wafer thin wisp. People have tried to create the reason that they use the word murmur is because it's an onomatopoeia, like damama. They like that idea that it was they wanted that similarity in the word, in that they chose a word that, sounds like, it's an onomatopoeia, it's a murmur. But there is this other idea that it's almost like it, I guess, what the sound a wafer would make if you split the wafer, you would barely hear it. So it's in a sound that almost is completely, almost imperceptible. You almost couldn't hear it, which of course the lesson is that if we're looking for God in these big signs, then we're going to miss God, because God doesn't always appear to us in the sign that we would like God to appear, in the burning bush, which again happened at the very same place. So if Elijah is expecting God to come into the fire, which again, as we said, God gave him the fire to see, but God didn't speak to him there. God spoke to him in a still, small voice. And that's the words that we would use. I mean, you could almost use that as the mantra for what we're supposed to be listening to. If we're even as good as Elijah, if we're even a prophet, that the only thing we might hear when God speaks to us is the kol demama daka, is that still small voice.
Right? I mean, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, or, even today, the reality is that, I might be sitting in the synagogue during my holidays and something comes upon me that feels very spiritual, but it may be in a different form of
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah,
of
people
whatever.
would say that
Faithfully.
we would, that yes, that it might not appear as the same. There is that understanding. As I said before, when they made The Prince of Egypt a few years back, which is one of the more recent biblical movies, they actually chose to use a combination of voices for the God at the burning bush. They wanted a combination of sounds for God. And so they didn't just use one male voice out of it. They used a synthesized voice, because, what would you hear out of God's voice? It would sound different. So what happens when Elijah hears the voice? What does the voice actually say? Because there's a message in the voice, right? It's not just that God, as I said, the irony is God is in every one of those things. And this is what we're going to finish with right here. When Elijah heard it.
When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then a voice addressed him. Why are you here, Elijah?
Same phrase, Malacha po. Why are you here? So the mantle is his cloak, is the thing that he wore over himself, which it seems is in some, at least, readings of this text, or at least some understandings, that's all he wore. He wore underwear and a cloak, which would have been a very, well, no, it says he had it. It said when he was running, it says when he was running in front of him, that he was running with that. Like a prayer shawl would be nice, other than the fact that this seems to be a little bit bigger than that. You'll see, because he does something with that mantle. Yeah. What
He
is he?
asked, he answered, I am moved by zeal for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and have put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left.
Sounds a lot like what he said before. It's
Yes.
exactly what he said before. So God is basically testing him again.
Mhm.
Why are you here? Here's his answer.
The Lord said to him, go back by the way you came and on to the wilderness of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael as king of Aram.
Well, that's a pretty weird thing to do. You go
Yeah.
to another country that's the neighbor and the enemy of Israel, go to the Arameans, go to Syria, and make another guy king. Whoa, that's a pretty wild prophet work to do. Yep.
Also, anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king of Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Saphat of Ebel Mecholah, to succeed you as prophet.
Wow. So, and also make a new king of Israel, and also make a new prophet. So you got three things that I'm sending you out to do. So why are you here? Well, God, I'm here because I do your bidding. And God says, okay, well, now I'm going to give you three things to do. Now, why are you doing those three things? Oh, he was going to tell him.
Whoever escapes the sword of Hazael shall be slain by Jehu, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu shall be slain by Elisha. I leave in Israel only 7,000, every knee that has not knelt to Baal and every mouth that has not kissed him.
Oh, kissed him. Wow. That's pretty descriptive. And all those Baal kissing people. Now, he just told him, I'm going to leave 7,000 people left in the country. Now, that is a mass murder of hundreds of thousands of people are going to die. Are we supposed to believe that only 7,000 people are going to be left here? Well, that's a huge murder. But he's basically saying Hazael's going to kill him, Jehu's going to kill him, and Elisha. Wow, the prophet's going to kill him. Well, look, he killed some people. So it is very possible that he is going to kill more people. And this is where we're going to finish. Oh, yeah, no, he's got work to do. And this is where we're going to finish.
He set out from there and came upon Elisha, son of Shaphat, as he was plowing. There were 12 yoke of oxen ahead of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah came over to him and threw his mantle over him.
Yeah. There's his mantle. Now, it could have been a prayer shawl, but it seems like it was a pretty big mantle. And it seems like in my book, when I had my children's Bible, it was a big, hairy mantle. Like in my Bible, it would look like a bear. Back to those bears. A Canadian bear was used for that mantle. Yeah, they threw that mantle over Elisha. Wow. So he was out there plowing it, in the farm of his father, right? He was plowing. And Elijah comes and throws his mantle. You got a new job. That's his way of saying you're hired. Now, did Elisha have any idea he was about to be hired? I don't know. Keep going. Last part.
Okay. He left the oxen and ran after Elijah, saying, let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and I will follow you. And he answered him, go back. What have I done to you?
Now, what actually happens in that scene? Because some people say that he's basically, again, saying, I'm not stopping you. But it's also possible he's saying, what are you, some kind of baby? So, he seems to say, okay, go back. But is he saying go back and don't come back? Or, okay, go back. I'm not telling you can't go back. But here's what he does.
He turned back from him and took the yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He boiled their meat with the gear of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and followed Elijah and became his attendant.
Yeah, no, that seems kind of gross that he used it for the food, but it says right here, he burned the stuff as firewood. He took the yoke and he used it as firewood. So he didn't put it in the food. He actually used it for the food. Yes. So very dramatic scene. Elijah now has a helper. He does not seem like a great person to work for personally. He seems like he's got a very short fuse, but we'll get to that. Elijah has a short fuse, and guess what? Elisha seems to have a short fuse too, as we'll see in the coming chapters. So he might have been a good understudy, but yes, as Reverend Lynn says, it's very reminiscent of the way Jesus brought his disciples in. It's very reminiscent. It's not exactly a coincidence, because Jesus does the same thing to people. He says, come on with me. And they're like, yeah, I gotta do my job. And Jesus says, hey, look, you can do your own job, but he doesn't exactly make them feel like losers, but he basically says, that ain't important work. You want to be a fisher of fish, or you want to be a fisher of men? He says to people, look, puts them on the spot. You can stay with your family, or you can come with me, because I'll tell you one thing, family means nothing anymore. That's a pretty harsh thing to say, but Elijah just told him to some extent, you're coming with me. He doesn't say, yeah, but I have to work for my dad. I can't come right now. He says, come with me. He doesn't say, you got a choice. You're either going to do this or you're going to be on the other side. So this is a perfect thing to read just before the high holidays.
Question about
Yes,
The funeral.
yes.
Yesterday, except for all the grand pomp stuff. How similar was it to a Jewish?
To a Jewish funeral? Well, it's interesting because there was two steps. There was a funeral part and then a burial part, which we actually do. And we usually do it in the same place, right? So today I'm going to do a chapel, and sometimes it's done at a graveside. But in other states, Judith, in the eastern coast of our country, the chapels, and also the Midwest, by the way, the chapels are oftentimes very far away from the burial place. And people will do a caravan. They will caravan over to right? Some people know it. Rosemary, you have family in the Midwest. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
They used to do it here many years ago. Many years ago, there were chapels, Jewish chapels. Every cemetery now in California has their own chapel.
In fact, I was a kid, but I was in one.
The chapels used to be at the mortuaries, folks. There was a business reason for it. The chapels were part of the mortuary services, and the funeral stuff was done by the cemeteries, the burials. Today, they are now owned by the same multinational corporation. And I have to go there to help in such a burial. And still separate in some places, yes. And it was separate at Eden until about 15, not even 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Groman and Eden were separate companies, yes. And we won't be here next week, but we will be here 2 weeks. But we will be at Bridgeport to toss away our sins for Tasha.
No, I started sinning immediately, so I have.
Start sitting immediately. I was sitting right there. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.